Welcome and thank you all so much for joining us today. My name is Sydney Gary. I'm the Conference and Communications Coordinator with the Natural Start Alliance. Today, we are welcoming Ariella Cook-Shonkoff, who is the author of the new book, Raising Anti-Doomers: How to Bring Up Resilient Kids Through Climate Change and Tumultuous Times. We are so excited to have her share insights and practical tools from this incredible resource. Okay, next slide. Let's get into it. So children today are growing up in a world where climate change, environmental crises, and global challenges are not just increasingly visible, but in many cases, children are experiencing them directly. Young children notice changes in their environment quickly, and they pay close attention to the ways that adults react. Children can experience anxiety, fear, hopelessness, all about the future, just the same as adults. And this is often called eco-anxiety or doomism. And they are particularly susceptible to these feelings when they're receiving those messages from the adults around them. So these feelings not only affect the well-being of young children, but they also have broader implications for the health of our planet as we're aiming to nurture the next generation of solution-oriented stewards. Now, at the same time, we know that children are resilient. We know that they're curious and that they're capable of sustaining hope. They can learn to respond to uncertainty with creativity and action and care rather than fear or paralysis. But this is in large part dependent on how we, as educators and caregivers, engage with them. So today's webinar is rooted in the work and insights of Ariella Cook-Shonkoff, again, author of the new book, Raising Anti-Doomers. This is a groundbreaking guide that helps us move beyond fear, denial, and overwhelm toward helpful engagement, not helpful, hopeful, also helpful though, resilience and meaningful connection. Raising Anti-Doomers is about supporting children to develop a sense of agency and a connection to the natural world, even in the face of complex global challenges. So I'm so excited to introduce you all to Ariella to explore this incredible practical resource. Ariella is a licensed psychotherapist, a registered art therapist, and a leading voice in climate psychology. Based in Berkeley, California, Ariella helps individuals, families, and communities transform climate anxiety, grief, and overwhelm into emotional resilience, creative agency, and purposeful action. Her work sits at the intersection of psychology, expressive arts, and ecological healing. A former executive committee member of the Climate Psychology Alliance North America and the founder and current co-chair of its Expressive Arts Committee, Ariella's work has been featured in the New York Times, the Washington Post, Glamour, and Salon.
Thank you so much, Sydney. And I want to thank Natural Start Alliance as well and for inviting me to be here with you all today. And I want to thank each of you for choosing to tune in for this hour, despite all of the competing demands. And I know there are many. I hope that our time together will give you some tools and a dose of inspiration for the important work that you're already doing with children. But before I start, I'd like to invite you to take a quick micro reset. So, not sure where you're coming from or, how your day's been going, but this is just an opportunity, without thinking too much at all, just to check in with your body and see what it feels like doing right now. So just make those kind of final shifts. And if there's a stretch, or a posture or a movement or a breath that you want to explore for a moment, go for it. Don't be shy. So I'm gonna, just kind of move a little bit here and just see what's feeling good. And by rebalancing, we can all arrive and be more fully present here in our virtual community. Um, so yeah. Okay. Wonderful. All right, let's get started. So I'm talking today, as Sydney pretty much shared, about how to raise anti-doomer children in a changing climate. And today I have two goals. The first one is to provide you with an overview of how young people and adults are orienting to the worsening climate emergency. And two, to share with you some ways to help kids and grown-ups cultivate what I call an anti-doomer mindset. Um, okay. Are the slides working? Just checking.
Working. Great.
Good. All right. So about me, first I want to share something about myself. So often we introduce our adult selves to each other with fancy resumes or bios, maybe what was just read actually, even though our stories and our identities are more far-reaching than that, extending into our childhood and our ancestral lineage. So I grew up in a small town in southwestern Connecticut on what are the traditional lands of the Wappinger and Ramapo peoples. As a child growing up in a safe community, I had the privilege of spending a lot of time outside in the more than human world. Behind our house, there were woods to explore. Our property was bordered by a small creek, and we tended a small veggie and herb garden. And so the two photos that you see here are me as a third grader, proudly holding up a poster that was a finalist at the state EPA contest. It says, find a pollution solution today. And then also a photo when I participated in a panel as a high school student with none other than the legendary Jane Goodall, who many of you know. She passed recently, and I really think it made a huge mark in my life. And I wanted to share those with you. So you can see how my early childhood foundation set me up in a way to care deeply about the natural world. And I'm sure that each of you has your own story that led you to this point as an environmental educator. I'll introduce to you an exercise in a moment that will give you some time to explore this. And in my grown-up work, I'm an integrative therapist, an ecotherapist, and writer, and I see both children and adults in my private practice. We already talked about that. But beyond my clinical work, I see myself as a child advocate. And as a parent myself, I'm also motivated to think about the well-being of future generations. Um, okay. So about my book, here's a picture of it. It covers a lot of ground. It's not limited to our climate emergency. The ideas and the frames apply to other looming existential stressors as well. And the book is full of creative arts and nature-based exercises, reflections and mindfulness exercises, and a framework for how on earth do we talk to kids about these intense issues. I developed my own illustrations. Uh, Not that I drew them, I didn't in this case. I had a pizza sandwich, an incredible illustrator. Put them to life in my book, shall we say. So those are to help simplify like various psychological concepts, and I'll be sharing some of those illustrations today. And a lot of these exercises can be done individually or in groups. Okay, so we're gonna kind of jump right in. Before we get into the more didactic portion of the presentation, I'm going to invite you to participate in a short, definitely short, reflection about your own personal relationship to the more than human world. So this exercise, the Eco-Ancestral Identity Timeline, is in my book, and it's based upon my colleague Thomas Doherty's work. And so this is really the interactive moment for you to, take a look at this sample timeline from childhood to present and think about a time in your life that you felt deeply connected to the natural world. Um, Maybe a place you've traveled to or a place you visit often, a favorite childhood spot. It could be an encounter with an animal or a pet. Um, there's so many, yeah, you can kind of just, this is just to get you thinking about it. And I'll also invite you to drop into the chat if you would like to share an example with everyone. And um, and I think Sydney can read a few of those aloud eventually, but feel free to share if you'd like. There's no pressure.
Someone says sailing on the Hudson River. Jan says hanging out up in the trees. Barbara says she grew up running free in the woods and parks. Brittany says she was lucky enough. Oh, they're coming in hot. Hold on. Lucky enough to go to farm preschool. Lauren says going to the beach with my family and collecting shells.
It's so beautiful to hear. Thank you for sharing, everyone. Like just these memories, and I mean they resonate. I imagine they ripple throughout, and many of us might even, yeah, they might resonate with us in our lives in some way. And I'll just go on to say this is an exercise that you could spend a lot of time on and work on indefinitely. I mean, really, at any stage of life and looking back, but also you can start early on. And so it's mapping these different moments of felt connection with the more than human world. And today you're just getting a flavor of it. This exercise is great for all ages as a way to build a more cohesive sense of identity related to the natural world, sometimes called an environmental identity or an ecological self. Um, and this exercise supports ongoing exploration of your connection with the more than human world, and it fosters gratitude as well. For your purposes, you can do this with kids in different ways. Either drawing on paper or through a writing project or collaging with photos, even. Um, you could also do this as a group by having each child write a memory on a slip of paper and hang it from a branch with yarn. I mean, I feel like you all probably have lots of good ideas, but I'm just naming a few that, I've thought of or done. Okay, so thank you again, everyone, for sharing. All right. I'm not going to spend too much time preaching to the choir about why a nature-based childhood is foundational for children's mental health, but many of you are familiar with Richard Louv's term, nature deficit disorder. When kids have a lack of exposure to the natural world, studies show higher rates of physical and emotional illnesses, lower attention spans, etc. And as part of nature, we're innately hungry for those connections, and we can feel their loss or absence. We have a natural affinity towards earth elements like greenery, trees, rivers, lakes, all that we just heard about in the in that example. And there's a body of research that proves these benefits too. The work that many of you do as environmental educators sets up a foundation for life. Adults who enjoy nature, or even those in environmental careers, so often link it back to positive outdoor experiences from their childhood. Okay, today's screen-based childhood. This slide might be as depressing for you as it is for me, even as we know just how important a nature-based childhood is for children's healthy minds and bodies and psyches. It's far from the norm today. As I see and hear about each week in my office, kids are glued to their devices. They're addicted to devices created to be addictive. I'll say that again. They're addicted to devices created to be addictive. Oh my gosh, tongue twister. All of this despite repeated warnings by child development experts to limit screen use. So, from my perspective, I won't go into this too much, but there was a pandemic inflection point when our society embraced screens in an adaptive way, but then failed to reset norms in the post pandemic years. And most of us here have seen the negative health impacts on kids from too much screen use, increased levels of anxiety and depression, bullying and self-esteem issues. And, yeah, I mean, this could be a presentation in and of itself. Um, Screens are one barrier to a healthy childhood, but then there's also our ongoing climate emergency. Yeah, our climate emergency, climate catastrophes happening in our communities, constantly in the news, and signs of collapsing ecosystems. And here we see wildfires and flooding. Of course, when you're outside with kids, they may spot more subtle signs of climate change and notice differences from year to year. A creek or riverbed that's dried up, a strange influx of pine beetles, which I just saw infested when I was in Colorado recently. Just the like incredible devastation of the trees there. Bird and like also birds who typically migrate but aren't. There's lots of signs I'm sure that have maybe come up in your in your work with kids. I think we don't often give kids enough credit, and we think that somehow they're oblivious to stuff. It doesn't seem like, I know, judging by this introduction, Sydney, maybe that's not where you're at, but a lot of folks, they're not really getting that kids are like sponges and their antennas are constantly collecting new information and soaking up all the emotions around them, including ours. So, depending on kids' ages and stages, they're taking in this paradox that, hey, there's a huge crisis, but not enough is happening to address it. So, things are getting worse and worse. It's like, and of course, kids are nowadays more exposed to, because of the internet and YouTube and social media. And I mean all ages, because, younger kids sometimes have older siblings or with, different families or adults that might have different rules around screens. So, you know, um, and when kids are exposed to too much, too soon, and too fast, too much, too soon, and too fast, it can be traumatizing. And vicarious trauma, which is hearing about or watching videos about disturbing events, is not talked about enough, in my opinion. And I think that's plaguing children in this country right now. Vicarious trauma. Um, and Many kids are growing up as alarmed and worried as adults. Sydney said this, if not more so because they're keenly aware that climate change and its effects, that's their future. And plus, they feel helpless. They're too young to vote. They don't have a seat at the table in the midst of this crisis. In a study in The Lancet in 2021 of 10,000 young people in 10 different countries, 59% said they're very or extremely worried about climate change. And this was 5 years ago. So those numbers are likely higher now. And while these findings are concerning, emotions are healthy and rational. In fact, many young people will often say that their emotions led them to act. And by acting, they actually felt better. So contributing to solve an issue can foster positive feelings. And I'll say more about this later on. Meanwhile, what's going on with the adults? In my book, I cover many different psychological responses that explain why adults respond the way they do, from denial to magic realism to psychic numbing and many, many more. But if we as adults stay stuck in our defenses, we can't help advocate for our kids, and we can't help to raise kids who will be part of the solution. I do want to, make it clear that individual adults are not to blame for our climate emergency. Children are paying the price because of systemic power and greed and an extractive economy. I do see what's hopium. I'm just gonna, since I happen to see it, I can just say hopium is like to kind of like toxic positivity. Like it's all gonna be okay. Someone's gonna solve that. Like we'll be okay. Like that. Um, okay. So as adults, one way that we can help our young people is by talking about the elephant in the room more in our daily adult conversations. So, sharing both positive and negative news stories and sharing how we're feeling, about it. And this will help us and to feel less alone and to prioritize the climate crisis. And by not talking about it, it actually drives up our anxiety and our kids' anxiety too. Okay, so the term silent majority is worth considering because it indicates where people actually stand. In a global survey of 75,000 people, the vast majority, over 80%, want their countries to act more boldly to address climate change. But this statistic is not often reflected in the news. And by talking about climate more, there's real potential to activate a social tipping point because the majority of people on this earth do care about sustainability. So let's, yeah, take a moment to like sit with that. And that's the kind of part one of the presentation. So um, I know that many of you will are familiar with some of this information, and we're going to move, yeah, from struggle to solutions next. But you know, it's still a lot. So just do a little wiggle, a little movement, and then we'll continue. I'm just going to have a sip of water. Thank you. All right. And yeah, I'm giving you a little extra time with the slide because there was a lot on that slide. Well, the question becomes, knowing what we're up against here, how do we reconcile a nature-based childhood with our stark climate reality? I'm gonna, I've I've kind of crafted for you 5 ideas from my book for you to consider. And so I'm gonna share those 5 with you now. All right, number 1 is cultivate what I call an anti-doomer mindset. There's a lot of curiosity about this phrase anti-doomer, but as I tell my own daughters, it just means standing up for what you believe in and not giving up. And when you do this over and over again, it strengthens your mindset and builds emotional capacity. It's warming. It's us. We're sure it's bad, but we can fix it. I love this quote by scientist Kimberly Nicholas. I think its attitude is everything. It can energize us or deflate us. And we teach the growth mindset in school for this reason. So instead of saying, I can't do that, we teach kids to say, I can't do that yet. But climate scientists say we have all the potential in the world to curb emissions, renewable energy, carbon drawdown solutions, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It's politics and industry regulation that's the sticking point. And when folks can generate group enthusiasm to tackle a cause, then systemic change is possible to confront the status quo. I know this is a lot, but I'm just kind of giving you some ideas to play with. Um, And okay, kind of orienting to your work a little bit more. Something fun to try with kids is to help build the anti-doomer muscle is making a hope book. And kids can use individual cameras to snap their own photos in the natural world or in their communities or homes, and they can compile a photo book of what inspires or uplifts them. And once the photos are printed out, they can assemble a book album, and they could make captions for the photos. They can add their own thoughts, feelings, poems, motivational quotes, and they can share them with each other and with their families. And what I love about this project is how it can be a resource that kids look back at, you know, different times in their lives. It's the books are personal, they're meaningful, and they're tangible reminders of hope. So I'm a, you know, an art therapist, and we're into like kind of externalizing those feelings and like putting it into something you can, you know, kind of look at and relate to in a different way. And then of course this like tangible element. Okay, another term in my book is that I use, and actually this is the one of the illustrations is called the anti-doomer sweet spot. You might not be able to make it all out, but hopefully you can see a little bit. Um, it's a tool, I guess I should say the hopium is in the balloon, yeah, up top, and like floating up, 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 and then the anchor is doomerism, which is just like, you know. Those are extremes. Okay. It's a tool for reorienting towards hope. Like between the balloon and the anchor, there's so much gray space that exists between the two, right? And so it shows all the expansiveness between the poles. And then I give examples in like the clouds and the little critters of stubborn optimism, grounded hope, realistic pessimism. These are some examples of engaging with the middle ground that hold nuance and can buoy us. Like we're not really, you know, these are reflexive places when we go to the poles. And by feeling into the space, we can be more flexible, adaptive, and energized to act. And our job as adults who work with kids and parent kids and support kids is to build our own emotional capacity to hold two truths simultaneously. One, that we're living through scary, uncertain times. And two, that hope is like an internal compass, which we can use as an orienting tool to know what to do next. When you model this adaptiveness for kids, that's what they learn too. Once we start to act, hope is everywhere. I'm sharing these words by Greta because I think that too often adults get caught up in the gab and we can pretty much talk ourselves out of anything. And one way around this is to take action from a place of values and trust that hope will follow. So thank you, Greta. Number two in this little kit is our emotions are an opportunity. And here I share another illustration from my book, The Climate Emotions Pellet. Um, and yes, it was inspired by how owl pellets are dissected in grade school. Um, for those of you who are doing those, I don't know, with your children or have done that yourselves. That's how my creative mind works. This is how I came up with this, or I formulated this idea. So all of these different feelings are brewing inside of us like a huge, overwhelming blob, and it's important, to normalize climate emotions and say to kids, hey, sometimes learning about this may make you feel sad or worried. You can always talk to me about that, or talk to your parents or someone you trust. But taking time to pick emotions apart and distill them and name them, even honor them, is important so that we better understand our feelings as they relate to the natural world or the climate crisis. And that way, our feelings won't control us or flatten us or as much. And this exercise is about really holding a gentle curiosity more than anything else. Like I know there's like tweezers and it's a little like, but it's really coming from curiosity. What's in there? How am I feeling? And I mean, that's, yeah, some good, social emotional learning as well. So, climate emotions pellet can be adapted for different age groups. You can teach it as a 3D sculpture using clay and nature friends like twigs and branches and leaves. Or it could be 2D on paper. Tweens and teens and adults can explore some of the emotional complexities around climate emotions, while I think younger kids can focus on, depending on age and developmental stage, they can focus on positive emotions about spending time in nature. So joy, excitement, awe, curiosity. And metabolizing emotions is healthy for all ages and can lead to long-term engagement. Number three, teach about privilege. I like to say, with privilege comes responsibility. I'm sure that many of you include this in your work already, but teaching kids about basic concepts of justness and empathy and equality is more important now than ever. And to create what is called a culture of care in the midst of our current climate will take commitment. It's certainly not what's modeled in our leadership right now. So privilege can easily be taken for granted. And environmental racism, is a structural problem. Not everyone gets the same access to green spaces. Many kids live in polluted, or high risk climate zones. And so teaching kids to understand that we're all connected and to some degree responsible for one another can help reshape our culture to be trust-based rather than fear-based. Okay. Number four, create space for kid-friendly conversations. A question that you might grapple with as educators is when to let kids know about climate change and how much to share. And I don't think there's a cookie cutter formula for talking to kids who are this age versus that, because kids develop differently. And it takes knowing a child's nature, sense of self in the world, current life stressors, and, other factors to understand when they might be ready, what they might be ready for or not ready for. And in a way, this is good news because it means that you can trust your judgment and even I'd say your intuition a bit. Um, but that said, my book does have a chart that helps to imagine talking to kids about the natural world and climate change with respect to child development. So I do have a chart in my book, and I'm going to share a few points from that. Up until, and I know that some of you will know some of this, but yeah, hopefully you'll learn something new in this segment too. Up until age 5, kids are experiencing rapid brain development. So it's a vulnerable period that deserves protection as much as possible. So simply cultivating an environmental identity through sensory play and exploration is a healthy approach at this time. And elementary school is a good time to introduce life cycles and ecological systems and weave in some basics about climate change, as well as explore the human impact on the environment. In some ways, we can adapt our systems to take better care of the planet. And okay, so this is my maybe more from my therapist orientation. I would say in general, it's wise to move slowly, sprinkling in climate information if appropriate, and give kids, time to integrate the information between classes. I think it's important to provide a cushion of positive messaging as well, so that you're not introducing them to something that's frightening, without also, connecting them to hopeful information or yeah. So you don't want to introduce something disturbing and then leave them dangling with that or end on that. It's you want to also give in Harriet Sugarman calls them like 5 empowerment points for each climate truth. But I think you can experiment and play around with that. Um, and erring on the side of caution means that you can always teach more later on. Like there's no rush. We know a lot. So it could be hard on us to maybe titrate it, but you can just, see how they respond to something and then make a decision whether or not you're gonna teach more or not, if that makes sense. Okay. And one way that adults sometimes miss kids is not paying enough attention to their nonverbal cues. There's a tendency to expect kids to always process feelings verbally. I'm feeling this, or this upsets me, which very adult-like actually, which can feel intense or unnatural for kids. And even in the therapy room, they're not always doing that. They're communicating in other ways. Um, and so, anyway, I was going to say, just generally looking at facial expressions, posture, behavior. Yeah, it's important to pay attention to what they're like, not their own words, but how are they, right? And if a child in your group is looking off into space or very restless, you may want to pull them aside and check in about the topic and safety around it. We're talking about X right now. What do you notice in your body when we talk about it? Can you give me a thumbs up or down to let me know so that there's a sense of safety and yeah, and you're kind of keeping tabs on. I don't know how large your groups of kids are, but so, but all right. And the last thing I'm going to share from this segment is what I call the 3 V's, which stands for voice, validate, and vision. Voice means giving kids a welcome mat to speak their truth and express themselves so they feel listened to and respected. How nice, right? Whether that's through talking or making art or acting or singing or movement. I'm a big fan of open mics or group shares where kids can learn from each other and connect, but just simply, yeah, creating those opportunities for kids to exercise their voices, share what they want to share, speak their truth. Um, and the second, validate, is a very therapist-y word. And validating means attuning to a child and listening without judging or commenting or problem solving or seeking to change their opinion, so that you stay with their experience and honor it in their own right. And that can be really hard to do. It's like, especially I imagine as educators, because you might know, well, you might know something and want to jump to the solution or help, a child feel more hopeful. But sometimes, the kids got to go through in their own pace, right? And you're just kind of gently staying with them and reflecting their experience without imposing anything onto it. The last V is vision, and it's the action part of this trio. Visioning is collaborative and can be intergenerational. It can be co-creating actions or next steps based on interests, skills, time. And depending on age and stage, it might look like making a poster about an endangered animal and hanging it in a window, or attending an Earth Day rally, or participating in a park cleanup or a reforestation project, or I mean, et cetera, et cetera. There's so many different things, but the point is that that's a very collaborative process. And you're kind of next to the child, exploring, not getting ahead, right? But also not disappearing. So they feel like, oh, someone's in this with me. Someone's right there beside me. I mean, that's a huge buffer, like, or like a, not buffer, but like, can be really reassuring. So I think that the three V's are always good to have in your back pocket. All right. Um, as I wind down my presentation, I want to cheerlead all of you who are doing incredible intergenerational work, like all over. I know you're all over the place, so in your communities. And I just want to say, I truly believe that intergenerational eco and climate work is the way forward. Strengthening bonds across age groups fortifies our efforts, allows for knowledge and skill sharing, and the cross pollination of ideas. And I highlight different examples in my book, of intergenerational work, and there's many ways to approach this, from cultural celebrations to community mural projects, school-based recycling initiatives, community gardens, etc. So just let's look at how each generation brings to the table different strengths that complement one another. Right here, I've like plucked one from each. I have many more for each of these generational categories. But kids bring fresh ideas, teens bring bold action, parents bring mentorship, and elders bring life experience. So it just gives you a flavor of like some of what the different generations can offer. Um, okay. Oh, huh. Okay. I'm missing one slide, but it's okay. I was gonna just, yeah, I'll just go on because actually I'm looking at the clock anyway. So to wrap up, I'll share a story that many of you have heard before. I think it's a nice place to end my talk today. I first heard this story as a young girl, and it always stuck with me. So, The Star Thrower by Lauren Isley. One day, an older man is walking along the beach and he notices a boy pick up a starfish left behind on the sand because of the low tide. The boy hurls the starfish into the water. Then he does it again and again. The old man asks him, why is he doing that since he can't possibly save them all? And the boy listens politely and picks up another starfish and throws it into the water, saying, because it makes a difference to this one. We adults can learn so much from this boy and from each child that we get to know. And each one of us can join him and join this boy and be a star thrower and do what we can, even if the end result isn't perfect. We can't save everything, and yet there's so much that we can save. So I just want to thank you all for the work you're doing to raise a healthy and engaged next generation of kids. And that, there's one more slide, which is just my book. If you want to stay in touch, don't be shy, reach out. Uh, you can, yeah, find me at these places. My book is sold all over. If you want to order a copy, feel free. But yeah, I really grateful to be here today. And yeah, Sydney, I think we're probably about out of time anyway, so I'll hand it over.
Yeah, I think we have time for just a couple of questions. I'm
hmm
not seeing any at in the chat at present, but you're welcome, everyone, to drop them in there. We did get a couple that came in registration on the registration form.
hmm
The first one being, what would you say to those who say that climate dread is a necessary way of ensuring we take action?
Well, I think that like that's an example of what we've talked about today. So like dread, anxiety, all of that can lead to action. So it's like it's part of that emotion, the pellet. It's part of that climate emotions pellet and so there's like you if you know you don't push it away, but you create some space to engage with the dread, and that can lead into this kind of sense of agency and next steps. But sometimes like that dread will sink you, like in that the illustration of with the anchor. And then you when you're in that state, I mean, you could be in some form of fight or flight. You lose agency.
And I guess kind of on that same line of thought, another question, um, how do you know if we've gone too far into either extreme? So
Hmm.
the one end being like too much hopium, optimist, I guess, and the other side being really sunken down in the state of doom. Are there any signs that you know of that
Like
in
that
either?
that you would see that you would notice in yourself or notice in others.
I guess I didn't
Yeah.
pose a question, so maybe
Okay, okay.
it's for both.
I think that the sign is like, are you engaged? Or like if you're in hopium, you're just kind of like, I'm gonna distract and live my life and not worry about this and think someone else is gonna solve it. And if you're in the doomerism state, you're just like, I think of it as suffocating. It sucks the energy out. And so I doubt you're going to be engaging either. And so I think the way you know is like, are you paying a little attention? Are you paying or like, and then I mean I have in my book some examples of like um keeping yourself on track almost like climate accountability buddy where like you could create like a little plan with someone or with, a group and say like once a week I'm going to do this or once a month I attend this meeting. So you have these like systems in place to make sure. But yeah,
I love that. Yeah, I think that also like attends to the part of helping people not to feel so alone, which can contribute to that sense of doom. The
right.
climate accountability part there. It's great.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I really loved when you were talking about the Book of Hope activity you've seen or done with children and the hands-on climate emotions pellet. And I was wondering if you had any other examples of a project or activity that you like to do with children to help them process big emotions related to climate change.
The easiest one, like, I mean, there's many examples, but there's this project that my colleague has kind of spearheaded, the climate emotions mandala. I do feel like I love a closed shape. This is again our therapist to me. So expressing, feelings within like a circle, or it could be, yeah, it just like, and just use color, shapes, and lines to, you can, just show how you're feeling about this, or um I also, just to give you something a little more like expressive artsy, like I've done, with kids, hope and doomer puppets that can interact. And so you can imagine, I mean, that's kind of fun. So whatever puppets materials you have, and then they're telling stories to each other about like, okay, this one's the hopeful one and this is the doomer one. And actually kids and adults have those voices in their heads. So I mean, I've done this in many ways, but like it certainly works well, to even say like, well, I think that this isn't going to work out. And then like the hope puppet talks back, well, I think that this, I've heard this, and and I know about this thing, so it's really interactive and dynamic. And so that's another one. Yeah, there's many more. I'm just, those are two.
I love the puppet one. I feel like most immediately that just screams giving the child a sense of agency and telling a story, or like what's possible. Or
Yeah,
that's great. I love that. Thank you.
cool. Yeah, you're welcome.
And maybe just one last question. Somebody had mentioned in registration that they're hoping you could address or touch on some advice or insight for people who don't have kids yet, but are
Mhm.
wanting to, but are scared
Mm.
because of uncertainty, politics, climate, all around climate change.
It's so hard, and there's like, I can think of the book The Kid Question and Generation Dread, which the authors really dig into that question. I think, I mean, I have kids, and I like have, my motherhood has been like very much interwoven in that, has been intensifying wildfires. So it's been like part of this journey of motherhood. I think that I'm just like I'm gonna come back to this idea of um, attitude and environmental identity, and if like just how you can, I mean, you have to make the right decision, right, for yourself. There's no one can tell you what to do, but I think that there's ways to feel hopeful, like you're going to have that on the other side if you choose to become a parent. And I also want to point to the statistic I shared, which is that people are hungry for, change, climate change action. And so there's like, there's hope in it. I mean, we're all, and then I think the other piece is like, we're as parents, like, since I am one, like we're uniquely motivated in a way, or anyone working with kids or any relative, but like to like care. So it's like it's actually, it just turns up the engagement dial. So I don't know. I just wanted to like report from the other side, like, there's, but I think it's a really delicate question, and um yeah, it's sad that we're in this place where that, I mean, that is a pressing, concern amongst, people, and many people are choosing not to have, yeah, families for this reason, for the climate crisis reasons. So, yeah, I don't know. It's hard to dig in because it's a really big one, but yeah, I think there's, and then just looking for support. I just want to say, as my therapist self has to give a little referral, like find a group. There's groups that, at least locally, that they sit and they like talk about, climate cafes. There's ones virtual as well. So finding a climate cafe with that topic might be really, really helpful.
Fabulous. Thank you so much, Ariella.
Yeah.
And share. Um, let's see. Yeah. Thank you again, just very much for leading today's webinar and sharing such like meaningful and you can tell just very thoughtful insights and tools. And thank you everybody who joined us today for also offering such meaningful and engaged questions. As I said at the beginning, the recording for today's webinar will be made available on the Natural Start website within a week following today's live event. And we will be sure to send out an email notification to all registrants once it's published. And so before we part ways this afternoon, I just want to close us out with a couple of Natural Start announcements. Next month's webinar is a dearly beloved annual event that we offer in partnership with members of the Blueberry Award Committee at the Evanston Public Library. That's right, it's our annual Blueberry Award webinar. For those of you who are not familiar, the Blueberry Award is the first of its kind, and it's a literary award that honors outstanding children's books that deepen young readers' relationships with the natural world. So, for educators and caregivers seeking high quality titles that inspire curiosity and care for the earth, the Blueberry Award list truly is a trusted resource. So, you can join us on Wednesday, March 25th. We'll hear from the award committee as they announce the winners and honors and also share practical strategies for using these titles in classrooms and in outdoor learning settings. We'll go ahead and drop the link to the webinar page also in the chat. Register today or anytime. A reminder that we are heading to San Antonio, Texas this summer for our 2026 annual Nature-Based Early Learning Conference, which will take place June 24th through the 27th. And there will also be an online option with both live and on-demand content. The San Antonio conference is going to be a wonderful 4-day event in partnership with our friends at the San Antonio Zoo and the Will Smith Zoo School. And we are working hard behind the scenes to have registration open to you all next week. More on that soon, so be sure to stay up to date on our website, as well as on social media. And if you are on our mailing list, of course, you'll be notified via email as well. And then lastly, just another plug for sponsorship. With registration opening just around the corner, we are still standing with wide and welcome arms to all conference sponsors. Sponsors receive a variety of benefits and can connect with nature-based educators from across the US and beyond. So if you're interested in being a sponsor or you know of another company or individual who would be, please do reach out to us at info@naturalstart.org. You can find more information about sponsor benefits also on the conference website, which we will also drop in the chat here. That is all that I have for you all today. Thank you so much for joining us. Ariella, thank you again for your time. I hope you all have a great rest of your week.